as you know, Samuel Alito has just extended the, I wouldn't say moratorium, but pause period on the so-called abortion pill, mifepristone. And the Supreme Court is going to rule very shortly. I think this is a case they need to decide sooner rather than later. And obviously it's a very interesting case because it's not just abortion, it's the whole procedure of how the FDA approves drugs. This is a drug that was approved literally during the Clinton administration and is safer than Tylenol. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, what are the ramifications? What do you think the Supreme Court's going to do? And what are the ramifications, both electorally and otherwise? Why don't we start with Masada?
Well, this is a very, very important issue for me personally. But I want to go through a couple of statistics. First of all, I think the Supreme Court, there's a reason they're letting this result be known on Friday night. They don't want the publicity. I'm thinking they're probably leaning towards banning this drug. And this drug is so important. First of all, it is safe. And the whole fact that it was brought up, I mean, there was a CNN poll or a CNN study that was done that showed out of 1 million people, there were 5 deaths associated with this drug. Penicillin, 4 times greater. Viagra, 10 times greater risk to take. But I will tell you what people are forgetting in this whole debate is that behind every pill, behind every abortion story, there's a human being. And I wrote last year, I wrote for the Independent UK. I wrote my personal story where I was experiencing early pregnancy loss. And I went to a pro-life doctor who insisted that this baby, this whatever you want to call it that was inside of me, had a chance of survival. Every other doctor said it wasn't going to happen. He called me a baby killer. He said I should go to an abortion clinic. The only place, and in my entire life, and this was a much wanted pregnancy, one that I prayed for. And in my entire life, I never assumed I would need an abortion clinic. They were the only ones who showed me any compassion. This was one of the hardest periods of my entire life. And they're the only ones. And they said, listen, we'll help you. We'll take care of you. But Arizona has a law that you have to wait a day, a 24-hour period to think about it. There was nothing to think about. This was just cells. It wasn't going to turn into anything. And I was tormented. And luckily things worked out in a way that there was no heartbeat at that time. And I was allowed to be taken care of. But this drug is one that will prevent women from having to go through situations like that. I mean, it's not just about abortion. It's about early pregnancy loss. It's about miscarriages. I mean, if you're asking a woman to not take a drug that she might have to miscarry for up to 2 months, I mean, that is cruel. That is insensitive. And you know what? I think once you like, I'll give you an example. Barry Goldwater in Arizona was very much against gays and gay rights. And then he had a grandson who was gay, and suddenly it was a human face, somebody that he loved. And I think that we're losing the war in America of togetherness because we don't see a person behind the story. We don't see how it's affecting someone's life. I mean, this stuff is important. We need to come together as a country and realize that there are people behind every story.
Yeah, Masada, I am so glad you shared your story. I think it's so important to have compassion and to have your voice be heard. I think that it's important to note that there are 2 people behind every abortion story. There is the child and there is the mother. And I think the more we can humanize both the mother and the child, then that's where we can find the common ground. And the truth of the matter is, I think this debate's focused on the wrong thing. I think what we should focus on is prevention in most cases, because the vast majority of abortions are from unwanted pregnancies, not from babies who are desired. When it comes to fetal abnormalities, rape and incest cases are, rape, I believe, is less than 0.5%. So I'm talking about the preponderance of abortion. If we societally, 2006, Joe Biden said that an abortion is a tragedy. He doesn't believe that anymore because he's been pushed so far to the left. Bill Clinton, an era ago, said that we should have abortion be safe, legal, and rare. He doesn't believe that anymore. And I think we need to go back to that. That's a middle ground. Like, let's try to reduce the number, where I think that the shared middle ground here should be focused on prevention. And yes, there are some Catholics who want to impose their anti-birth control, theology on people, I think that's wrong. And I think that you are going to get enough. There are actually a lot more Protestants than Catholics in this country, and actually a lot of Catholics who disagree with the church when it comes to birth control. You're going to get a lot more people on your side who are supporting things like expanding vasectomies, expanding, just making sure that people are very proactive when it comes to preventing these types of pregnancies as opposed to terminating. I think we've kept our eye off the ball as it relates to that. And then as it relates to mifepristone, I want to share some other statistics here, because I don't think it's apples to apples to compare Viagra and penicillin, because we're talking about the alternative, which is a chemical abortion, which is pill abortion, versus a surgical abortion. There have been, in the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, reported longitudinal study from Finland. 1 in 5 women had a complication from a pill abortion. It's 4 times the rate versus a surgical abortion. And then when it comes to another study as well, found that there was a much higher need for needing surgery following a pill abortion versus a surgical abortion. So it's dangerous. And also the FDA did not follow its protocol in how it approved this drug. And that's ultimately is what this is about. It's actually not about, it's more about the FDA failed to follow its protocol. That's why it's being challenged legally.
Well, first of all, I find it kind of interesting that it's challenged 23 years later after it came out, as opposed to if it were a true problem.
No, Dave, you know the truth is, but I'm going to respond to that though, because the FDA was challenged immediately, and by their own standards, they're supposed to respond within 180 days. They failed to respond, and there was no legal repercussions.
I've never heard anything about that. All I know is that the track record is incredibly safe. This is a drug that's statistically safer than Tylenol, and the bottom line is, on top of that, you have a whole can of worms, because if what the FDA does can be overturned by what is essentially judicial fiat, then that's going to give any judge, liberal or conservative, oh, you know what? My son had a bad experience on Prozac. Well, let's outlaw that one. It's going to make it a capricious system, and it's going to really stymie R&D and a lot of the whole process that we need in this country to get new, potentially life-saving drugs approved. As far as the Supreme Court goes, I think what they're going to do is they're going to take us back not to 1999, but they'll take us back to 2015, where they'll say that it's no longer allowed to be sent by mail. And again, sadly, as is so often the case with this abortion debate, women that lose are poor women. Wealthy women will always be able to get an abortion. And again, if you can't send something, then you have to go get it. And that's much harder for people that don't have the means to do so. But it's a losing debate for Republicans, and I think it's going to come back to roost again in 24, just as it has in many, many elections and in conservative states like Kansas and Kentucky.
And if I can just interject for a moment, I really find it offensive that somebody other than my doctor can have this conversation with me. If a woman needs medical help, it's not a moral issue. It's a moral issue between her and her faith and her God. I think it really needs to be up to the person and the doctor. And this is like, I would love to sit down and have an entire session discussing the abortion issue and medical issues with you guys, because I think it's so important that, you know what, we don't have to agree with each other, but I think we need to come together and say, yeah, we can discuss this without hating each other and come to some reasonable conclusions on how everybody wins.
And this is the one issue where we all agree. Everybody wants fewer abortions. I don't agree that, first of all, safe, legal, and rare, as good as it sounds, that's a bumper sticker. That's not a policy. And I don't think anyone is pro-abortion. Nobody wants an abortion. It's a traumatic thing. But so I agree, we can all work together. And Congress should not be legislating medicine. It's like the so-called partial birth abortion was another example. It should be between a woman and her doctor. Last word, Carrie.
It's about protecting human rights at the end of the day. And immediately at conception, there is 0 additional genetic material from the mother that is transmitted to the child. Immediately at conception, there are all of the chromosomes present for a unique, separate, individual human life. And more than 90% of scientists, I don't know what's wrong with the other 10%, say that immediately upon conception, it is a human life. There's no other species or genus. It's a Homo sapien. It's not some other foreign entity. It's not an appendix. It's not a toe of the mother. It is not a body part of the mother. It is an individual human being with dignity and the only thing separating an unborn child from an infant is time and nutrition. And so that dignity of that human person deserves to be respected and deserves to have a voice at the table.
So based on that argument, even 6 weeks is too long. There should never be an abortion, not even after 1 week, right? If it begins at fertilization.
Yeah, I agree. But you know what? It's democracy.
How do you compromise then?
Well, it's what the legislature passes. It's what the voters want. We're seeing it. I personally believe that slavery is very similar. The debate over slavery is very similar to the debate of abortion that we're having. The more I've been reading and studying about the Civil War and slavery, you had slave states, you had free states, you had people who were equivocating. The Lincoln Douglas debates, Stephen Douglas was trying to just say, you know what? If you want slavery in your state, that's fine. If you don't want slavery in your state, that's fine too. Ultimately, Abraham Lincoln said, right makes might. Slavery is wrong. And he won at the end of the day because the moral weight of the human life deserved to be free. And that's what I feel about being pro-life.
So I guess the question I have for you is, if you believe, which I do not believe entirely, I think it's complicated, but if you believe that life starts at conception, when there's a miscarriage, is the mother a murderer? Is she responsible?
No, that's natural. That's natural death. That has nothing to do at all. We're talking about the proactive killing of an innocent life versus a natural death. Very different, completely different.
Okay. I think it's a really deep subject. And I think we also need to consider what happens if you force a woman to have a baby and what happens to the life of that child. I mean, the life inside the womb versus the life outside of the womb. What responsibility do we have as a society to all these children who are unwanted? We have hundreds of thousands of children in this country in foster care. Why is and there are a lot of pro-life people. Why is not every single one of those adopted? I mean, I think I could find it a more reasonable approach if we didn't have so many kids that were unwanted and in group homes. I mean, I find that in this country, the richest country in the world, I find that morally repugnant, frankly.
Yeah, Naomi Schaefer Riley has a really great book about why the foster system is so dysfunctional. Part of it is that progressives believe that if you're a white parent, you shouldn't have a black baby be adopted, and they try to put barriers up to you, and they try to say it's racist if you're trying to adopt a black baby and you're a white couple, and they actually make it very, very hard to adopt. And that's why a lot of people go abroad. So, and I'm sure we all know people who have adopted children from abroad, in part because it is so hard and expensive and difficult. That I agree, like that's an area we can all agree on. Like, let's reform the adoption system.
And I think, unfortunately, to go with Masada's point, there's no shortage of, unwanted white babies. They're pretty much all adopted. It's babies of color. But unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. As always, such a spirited debate, and as always, respectful. Masada, it's been so great having you on the show, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you. It's been an honor to sit and chat with you guys. And I guess the message I would leave for viewers is, you know what, you don't have to agree with people, but you have to be respectful. And the fact that you can have a good conversation, that's a step forward for America.
Hear, hear. So on that note, thanks for joining us. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. We'll catch you next time.